My name is Gloria Washington. I'm 55 years old, and I never imagined my own daughter would shove me so hard at the Christmas dinner table that I'd crash onto the cold marble floor in front of the entire family, just so her mother-in-law could take my seat. What she didn't know was that very night, I would change her life forever. When she woke up the next morning, a letter would be waiting for her, and that letter would force her to choose: lose everything in 24 hours or accept my help to find herself again. Because sometimes consequences don't arrive as punishment. They arrive as a last chance at redemption. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. The night of December 24th, 2024 started like all the others. I arrived at Kendra's house with my heart full, gifts for my grandchildren Aaliyah, 12, and Isaiah, 15, my traditional soul food dishes that always were a hit, and the foolish hope that this Christmas would be different. Her house was immaculate. Golden lights, the smell of roasted turkey, everything arranged with that cold perfection she'd learned from her mother-in-law. "Grandma Gloria," the children shouted, running toward me. Those sincere hugs were the only moments of real warmth I'd feel that night. Kendra greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, Mom. Glad you got here early." Her voice had that tension I knew well, as if every word I said needed to be measured, weighed, approved before being accepted in that house. I walked in. The table was set for 8. There were only 6 of us. "Is someone else coming?" I asked, looking at the extra places. Kendra's smile got even tighter. "My mother-in-law will be here any minute." Mrs. Catherine Worthington, a 70-year-old white woman, old money, one of those who never had to prove anything to anyone because they were born with everything already proven. When Mrs. Worthington arrived, the temperature in the room changed. Kendra transformed right in front of me, helpful, attentive, her voice rising half a tone, her gestures becoming more delicate, as if she were playing the role of perfect daughter-in-law in a movie I wasn't invited to watch. "Mrs. Worthington, such a pleasure to have you here. Come in, come in." I sat in my usual spot, the head of the table, next to Kendra. I'd been sitting there for years, since she was 10, and we celebrated Christmas in our small apartment, where the smell of soul food filled every corner, and nobody pretended to be who they weren't. But as Mrs. Worthington approached the table, something in the air shifted. Kendra looked at me, and I saw in her eyes an expression I'll never forget. Cold, calculating, determined, the same expression she had as a child when she decided she was going to win something, no matter the cost. "Mother," her voice cut through the air like breaking glass, "that seat's for Mrs. Worthington." The tone wasn't a request. It was public, final, non-negotiable. I felt like I'd been slapped across the face. I looked around, the Worthingtons' silverware frozen in mid-air, Kendra's husband avoiding my gaze, the children's eyes wide open. "Kendra," my voice came firmer than I felt, "I've always sat here." I folded the napkin in my lap with trembling hands, trying to anchor myself to that chair, as if willpower alone would be enough. I said, "Move." She walked around and stood behind me. I caught her reflection in the polished glass of the cabinet, jaw locked, eyes shining with something I hadn't seen since she was a child, determined to win. Her hand pressed against my shoulder. I didn't move. And then she pushed me. Hard. The chair scraped against the marble with a sharp sound that cut through the silence. My body went backward. The cold floor hit my back, my elbow, my 55-year-old dignity. Gravy splattered across the hem of my dress, the pretty dress I'd chosen so carefully to impress these same people who were now staring at me as if I'd grown a second head. I heard Isaiah's fork clatter onto his plate with a metallic sound, Aaliyah's muffled gasp, the deafening silence that followed. For 1 second, just 1 second, nobody moved. The Worthingtons stared at me, mouths agape, my grandchildren with wide eyes, innocence mixed with confusion and horror. Kendra's hand was still suspended in the air, frozen, as if even she couldn't believe what she'd just done. My bones ached, but not as much as my pride. I pressed my lips together, took a deep breath, that sterilized air of the Worthingtons' house, soulless, lifeless, and I stood up, slowly, deliberately. Nobody offered to help. I picked up my chair and carried it to the farthest corner of the table, the place where the help would sit. Smoothing my stained dress, I sat down, back straight, chin up. I forced a smile I'd perfected in boardrooms and funerals, tight, cold, unbreakable. On the outside, I was the picture of control. On the inside, something ancient, twisted, and burned, humiliation curdling into a heat I'd spent my entire life trying to master. I watched Kendra return to her seat, my seat, without even glancing in my direction. And I wondered, just for a second, had I finally become invisible in my own family? The room remained silent. Glances came my way and quickly looked away. I kept my hands folded, my voice quiet, but my mind was screaming. This isn't over, not by a long shot. Dinner continued, but nothing tasted right. The room was too bright, too quiet, every smile stretched and artificial. Kendra started laughing at one of Mrs. Worthington's stories, too loud, her voice half a tone higher than normal, pretending that whole mess had never happened. I watched her, this woman I raised, acting like I was invisible. Every time her eyes passed over me without seeing, my chest tightened. I could taste copper on my tongue. Anger, or maybe shame, maybe both. Aaliyah sat across from me, her fork still, her eyes searching for mine. She looked lost, pale-faced, lips parted as if she might ask a question, but thought better of it. I tried to give her a reassuring smile. My mouth wouldn't cooperate. Instead, I focused on the cranberry sauce, spooning it onto my plate with careful ceremony. My hands trembled just enough for me to notice. Mrs. Worthington kept talking, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Isn't this turkey divine?" she said, looking everywhere but at me. Kendra echoed, "So moist, Mama, you really outdid yourself." But her eyes darted away, voice tight. It sounded like a line from a play she didn't believe in. Every scrape of silverware on china grated on my nerves, sharp, deliberate, like a warning. Isaiah hunched over his plate, pretending to text under the table, avoiding the whole scene. Aaliyah's little hand trembled as she reached for her glass. Nobody spoke about what happened. Nobody looked at the gravy stain on the floor. I wanted to stand up, scream, demand that the truth be spoken out loud. But I sat there silent, as always, pouring sauce and swallowing rage. I waited for the night to end, for the last guest to leave, for the moment I could breathe without witnesses. I'd been quiet my whole life, but tonight something inside me made a vow. Never again. I felt the promise form in the charged silence, cold, certain, waiting for the first chance to break through. When dinner ended, I excused myself quietly, just going to the restroom for a moment. Nobody responded. Nobody even looked up from their brandy glasses and business conversations. I, the woman who'd built an empire from nothing, wasn't included in. In the bathroom, the marble counter was ice cold under my fingertips. I gripped the edge, forcing my hands to stop shaking. The scent of Kendra's lilac hand soap hung in the air, too sweet, too delicate for a night like this. That artificial cloying smell threw me back years without warning. Suddenly, I was back in the cramped bathroom of our old apartment, peeling off my work uniform when Kendra burst in, cheeks flushed, fists clenched. She was 10, skinny legs, pink barrettes, eyes blazing. That afternoon at the mall, a man had looked me up and down and said, "Excuse me, maid, where's the restroom?" My mouth had gone dry. Before I could say anything, Kendra stepped forward, jaw set, voice trembling but clear. "That's my mama. She owns her own company." She didn't blink, just glared at the man until he turned and walked away. When he was gone, she slipped her little hand into mine, squeezing hard, as if daring the world to try again. Even now, I remember how small that hand felt and how fierce she was for me. For a moment, pride had washed over my shame. I'd thought, no, I'd been certain, my daughter would never let anyone humiliate us, not while she had breath in her lungs. But tonight, in this echoing bathroom, I wiped my face with trembling hands and felt something hot and bitter instead of pride. How does a child who fought for her mother become a woman who throws her down just to please people who will never truly accept her? The question burned, raw, alive, refusing to let me go. The lilac scent still lingered, sharp, unforgiving. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, red eyes, stained dress, shattered dignity. Outside, I could hear faint laughter, her new family, her new life. I stood straighter, my resolve hardening. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew the wound was open now, and I couldn't turn away from it. Soon, I'd have to face them all, and this time, I wouldn't be the only one exposed. I locked the bathroom door and let the cold marble press against my back. My hands moved without shaking as I pulled out my phone. There was no room for trembling, not now. The fury had crystallized into something sharper, cleaner, pure determination. I dialed Edward first. He picked up after one ring, his voice low and clipped. "Gloria, is everything all right?" "Edward," I said, and the steadiness in my tone surprised us both. "Revoke her signing rights, all of them. Not a cent moves without my say-so." He hesitated, a lawyer's pause, full of caution. "That's drastic, Gloria. Are you sure?" I pictured his face, somewhere between concern and calculation. He'd seen me through worse, but never this cold. "Do it, Edward. But Edward, if I call before 8:59, cancel everything." He drew a breath, logic battling with loyalty. "Understood." Next, I called Linda. She always picked up fast, practical as ever. "Linda, freeze payroll, suspend Kendra's accounts." No explanations yet. Brief silence. Just the tap of her keyboard in the background. "You want me to alert HR?" she asked, voice neutral. She never gave more than she had to. "Not unless I call back before 8:59. That's the line." She didn't question, but I could hear the tension in her silence. I thought of Kendra then, her absence in this circle louder than any voice. Even here, her choices pressed in, shaping every word I spoke. My daughter was nowhere near, but every move I made tonight was because of her. One more message, this time to Aaliyah's own, my granddaughter, my lifeline. I kept my voice gentle, softer than I felt. "You're safe, baby. Grandma loves you, always." No reply yet. Just the faint echo of her laughter from earlier, haunting the edge of my mind. I ended with Edward, repeating,
If I change my mind before dawn, you cancel everything." He cleared his throat. Understood. But Gloria, think carefully. That was as close as he came to comfort, a warning disguised as advice. In that bathroom, everyone stood where they always had. Edward, steady but wary. Linda, efficient, holding judgment. Kendra, a storm outside the door. Aaliyah, a hope I clung to. My empire of retribution was set, but the night held its breath.
When I got home, the red light on the answering machine blinked like an accusation. I set my bag down, heart already thudding. Kendra's voice spilled out, brittle and raw. "Mama, you embarrassed me tonight." She was shaking. I could hear it. A ragged edge under every syllable. But she didn't hesitate. "You made a scene in front of David's family. I can't believe you'd act like that. You humiliated me. You humiliated yourself." The gall of it. My own hands trembled as I hit replay, needing to be sure I'd heard right. She didn't stutter, didn't falter. She blamed me. She didn't apologize, didn't ask if I was hurt, if I'd made it home safe. Just poured it all on me. Each word hammered down what little mercy I had left for her. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. "You humiliated yourself," I muttered, voice so low it almost disappeared. "Tomorrow, you'll learn humility the hard way." I wanted her to hear it, to feel the weight of what she'd done, but the house swallowed my words. I opened the cabinet. My hand went straight to the whiskey, the bottle I swore I'd left in the past. The cap clicked open, sharp in the silence. The first sip scorched my throat, almost medicinal, like it could cauterize the wound inside me. The second went down harder, bitter with grief. My finger hovered over the phone. I nearly called Edward, told him I could move the deadline up, end the waiting, make her pay now. But something held me back, something faint and stubborn, almost like the memory of a hymn from long ago. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it kept me from crossing that final line. I sat in the blue glow of the machine, cornered by her words, by my own anger, by the ache that wouldn't let me destroy her. Not yet. It was after midnight when the phone rang. I knew before I picked it up, it would be Mavis. Nobody else called at that hour unless something was wrong or the spirit was moving. Her voice came through the crackle of the line, warm and sharp as ever. "Glory, the Lord won't let you sleep 'cause you walking in the wrong fire," she said. No greeting, just straight to the point, the way she's always been. I pressed the phone tight to my ear, half wishing I could hang up before she got further under my skin. I didn't tell her about the plans I'd made, the retribution I had set in motion. I just said I was handling business. My words sounded flat, even to me. Mavis let out one of those knowing sighs that always made me feel 10 years old again, caught in a lie I thought was clever. Then, without asking, she started humming that old hymn, the one my mother used to sing, soft and steady as she washed dishes long after dinner was done. "Lay your burden down." I could almost see the kitchen light flickering, smell the lemon oil from the wood she polished every Saturday. I gripped the receiver harder, angry at how easily Mavis's kindness slipped past all my defenses. She didn't preach. She didn't pry. Just let the song fill the silence between us. My house felt too clean, sharp with lemon oil, every polished surface reflecting back regret I tried to ignore. I told myself prayer was for the weak, for people who had nothing else. I was strong. I had to be. Or so I thought. But when I hung up, my hands shook. Mavis's hymn lingered, a gentle ache behind my ribs, making me wonder, just for a second, if strength was really what I needed most.
In my study, I sat alone, the house too quiet around me, My eyes landed on the photo tucked into the corner of my desk. A simple silver frame, a little smudged with age. Kendra, 6 years old, grinning wild, a smear of chocolate frosting on her cheek, both arms wrapped tight around my waist. I remembered that day. Her first cake, lopsided but proud, and she wanted me right beside her for the picture. I'd framed it back then as a reminder of what we'd built together. But as I looked closer now, something in her face caught me. The joy in her eyes, wide and bright, seemed foreign, like it belonged to another child, one I hadn't seen in years. When had that light faded? I traced the memory forward in my mind, through birthdays and graduations, and saw how shame had crept in, subtle as mildew. It ate at her from the edges, until all that was left was a woman trying to outgrow her own story. Still, I told myself, that was her battle. I gave her tools, a ladder out. She climbed, but not in the way I'd hoped. I tried to let it go. But then, as I shifted the frame to dust beneath it, a slip of paper caught my attention, tucked behind the photo, half folded. I didn't remember putting it there. It was a child's handwriting. "Mama, don't forget me." My throat tightened. I'd never seen it before, or I thought I hadn't. Did Kendra leave it for me back then? Or had I just ignored it, too busy teaching her to fight the world? The question lodged in me, sharp and unwelcome. I turned the picture face down, but the words echoed. Maybe I'd missed something important years ago. Maybe the fighting started with me. The doubt stayed, thin as a splinter under skin, refusing to let me rest. By 1:55 a.m., the house felt like it was straining at the seams, every floorboard, every window, pulsing with the countdown I'd set in motion. My laptop glared back at me, screen crowded with pending wire transfers and contracts stacked in a neat, damning queue. Accounts marked ready. Legal documents requiring only my signature. The air was so tight with anticipation that I found myself breathing shallow, as if a deep breath might set off the whole thing. My phone buzzed. Edward's name. His message sharp as a blade. Execution 9 sharp. No warmth, just the crisp professionalism I'd paid for all these years. I held the phone so tight, my knuckles ached. I could almost taste the power in the back of my throat, sharp and metallic, the kind of taste I remembered from blood after biting my tongue in boardroom wars. For decades, men like Edward and Mrs. Worthington's kind controlled my fate with a word or a signature. Now I held that same control over Kendra, my own daughter. I wanted to believe it was justice, but the silence in this house had its own weight, pressing in on me, squeezing out every excuse I'd built.
The clock on the wall hammered each minute louder than the last. I tried to sit, to focus on the numbers, the language of contracts, but my hands shook over the keyboard. I pictured Kendra's face, her eyes, stubborn and wounded, the way she'd looked at me tonight. My mind spun through the fantasy of vengeance, headlines, board meetings, her pride gutted in public. It was supposed to feel righteous. Instead, the silence grew so thick I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the living room clock, each sound a reminder I was alone. I flicked out the lamp. The dark didn't offer comfort, it just made the glow from my laptop harsher, the numbers more accusing. I could see my reflection in the black glass, a tired woman, mother and executioner both. I tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was wait, counting down, trapped between the power I'd always wanted and the guilt clawing at my chest.
The walls felt closer with every minute. Something worse was coming. I could feel it. By 2:30, the air felt too thick to swallow. My chest ached, not from age, not from the years that have stacked themselves on my back, but from the weight of what I was about to do, or maybe what I'd already become just by considering it. I slid down beside the sofa, knees creaking against the rug, and for a moment I just let the old fabric bite into my bones. I didn't care if I looked pitiful. I was tired of pretending. God, I whispered, not sure if I meant it as a prayer or a warning. If I do this, I win, but I lose everything that makes me me. My voice cracked. I felt the words catch in my throat, half formed, as if saying them might make the choice for me. The clock ticked on, steady and merciless, like it knew I had nowhere left to hide. I reached out, palm trembling, and pressed my hand to the Bible on the coffee table. The cover was slick. My tears again? Or maybe just the sweat from my hands. I remembered Mama's voice, gentle but sharp. Don't ever use the Lord to dress up your own pride, Gloria. I wanted to laugh at the memory, or maybe scream at it. I couldn't tell which. Don't let me be strong in the wrong way, I whispered, but the words felt thin, almost childish. What did strength even mean now? Was it holding my ground, making the call, letting Kendra feel the consequences? Or was it this breaking down, this desperate hope that mercy might be enough? Outside, the wind rattled the window, low and restless, like someone praying on the other side of the glass. I stayed there, torn in two, the Bible under my hand and the phone within reach. Both choices heavy, both voices loud in my head. I didn't move. I couldn't move. I just waited, caught between the woman I'd always been and the one I wasn't sure I wanted to become. At 3:17 in the morning, my phone started to buzz on the nightstand. The glow from the screen carved a hard line through the darkness. Kendra's name, bold as ever. I watched it ring until the light went out. I couldn't bring myself to answer. Her voice was the last thing I needed to hear after tonight. Brittle and sharp, full of explanations I didn't want. I set the phone down, but before I could even breathe, it started up again. This time, Aaliyah's name filled the screen. My thumb hovered over decline. I almost let it go. But something, maybe stubborn hope, maybe God, kept my finger still.
I waited, heart pounding, until the third ring. Then I pressed accept. For a moment, all I heard was soft static, a faint whimper in the background. Grandma. Her voice was small, rough from crying. It cut right through me. I can't sleep. I keep seeing you fall. Her words landed hard, like a bruise you discover the next day, proof you really did hit the ground. I pictured her curled up under that expensive duvet, clutching her phone with both hands, haunted by what her mother had done. There was a pause, so thick I could almost feel her breath in the space between us. Then she asked, "You still love Mama?" I tried to answer, but nothing came out. My mouth was dry, my chest tight. Tears I'd held back all night slid down my cheeks. She waited, patient, not pushing. Finally, I managed to whisper, "Yes, baby, always." The words left me raw, honest in a way I hadn't been all night. When the call ended, I stared at the screen. On it, a text from Kendra I hadn't seen before. Just a photo of my broken glasses on her marble floor, the lens cracked straight through. No apology, no words, just that image, a quiet, damning sign. I clutched the phone, feeling the weight of it. Everyone else could pretend it was nothing, but I knew what it meant, and I was the only one who cared enough to see it. After Aaliyah's call, the house felt hollowed out, as if her voice had swept through and softened the hard places I'd been carrying all night. I let myself sag into the kitchen chair, the pen trembling between my fingers.
That child, 12 years old, and already carrying more truth than most grown folks ever find. Her question echoed in my chest. Then we can find her again, right? Mama gets lost a lot. It stung because she meant Kendra, but there was a time folks said the same about me. I was wiping my eyes when Isaiah shuffled into the room, still half asleep, holding his phone like a shield. Grandma, Aaliyah says you're writing a letter to Mom. Did you tell her you forgave her? His voice was careful, watching me out the corner of his eye the way boys do when they sense trouble. I didn't say forgive. I said the truth. There's a difference. He nodded, but then, almost as an afterthought, he said, "She cries a lot, you know, Mom. She thinks we don't hear, but her bathroom's right next to my room. Last week she said, 'I wish I knew how to be better for Mama.'" His words dropped like stones in the silence. I stared at him, the ink running a little on the page. Kendra had never once let me see her cry since she was a girl. To admit she still wanted to be better for Mama, that was not the woman who shoved me from the head of the table, all ice and pride. It was a slip, just the boy's offhand truth, but it cracked something open in me. I remembered Kendra at 15, red-eyed, asking if I was ashamed of her. Back then, I hugged her, told her she was everything I'd ever hoped. Now I wondered if she still believed it. Isaiah went quiet, busying himself with the cereal box. He didn't realize what he'd given me, a glimpse behind Kendra's armor. For a moment, I felt the ground shift. Maybe there was more to fight for than my own pride.
I uncapped the pen. If I could put the pain into words, maybe I could find both of us lost, but not beyond saving. I wrote until the first light cracked the window pane, hand cramping the old desk lamp, throwing my shadow long and twisted across the floor. Each sentence pressed out of me like a confession in a hot church pew, how I'd mapped out her ruin, how easy it would have been to sign her away with a single call. But I didn't. Instead, I laid out everything she'd done and everything I'd chosen not to do. I put it all down in my own handwriting, the conditions she'd need to meet, the work and humility I'd demand, the therapy she'd never admit she needed. Not a plea, not an apology, just the truth as plain and heavy as the page itself. When I finished, I paused, hand trembling, heart racing, like I'd just run up the courthouse steps back in Birmingham. The air around me smelled sharp, ink, and beneath it, the faint salt of tears I hadn't noticed falling. I folded the letter, every crease deliberate, and slid it into a cream envelope so thick it felt like it could carry a verdict. I signed it, Mama. Nothing more. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was proof. Proof of what I could have done, proof of what I demanded instead. The door I was opening for her wasn't wide, but it was real. I stared at the envelope, my breath shallow, knowing there was no going back now. My phone felt slick in my hand as I dialed Edward. "Cancel everything," I said, voice hoarse but steady. He hesitated, just a beat. "Are you sure?" I looked at the envelope, at what I'd written, and felt the finality settle in my bones, more than ever. When I hung up, the letter sat heavy on the desk. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I held the proof, undeniable, and knew the line between us could never be ignored again. I didn't hand the letter to Kendra myself. Pride still had claws, and I wasn't ready to face the look in her eyes, not after everything. So I stood on the porch, her porch, not mine anymore, letter in hand, and pressed it into her housekeeper's palm. "Put this where she'll see it first thing," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The woman just nodded, glancing at me like she'd seen too much already, then turned away. I lingered a moment, half hoping Kendra would come down those marble stairs, hair muscled, eyes tired, meeting me. But the house was silent, expensive, cold, and silent. When I finally got to my car, I didn't look back. I drove through streets I once memorized, each turn a reminder of how far apart we'd grown. The sunrise was pink and soft, stretching across the windshield. For the first time in years, I saw it without dread crawling under my skin. No pit in my stomach, no storm in my head. Just that hush you get after surviving something that could have destroyed you. I checked my phone, waiting for the call that would signal the end, her destruction, my revenge. But at 9:01, nothing. No ringing, no angry voices, just silence. It should have felt like peace, but it came wrapped in fear. My hand shook. Mercy always costs more than revenge. I knew that now. I'd written the bill in my own blood. I sat there in the quiet morning, breath shallow, knees weak, feeling the weight of my choice settle in my bones. There was no going back. I had seen what pride could do, and now I was the only witness to what I'd chosen instead.
Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. I saw Aaliyah's name, and my hand trembled as I answered. Her voice was quiet, careful. "Mama found your letter. She's crying." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world seemed to hold its breath with me. "Did she read it all?" I managed. Aaliyah hesitated, then said, "She's reading it out loud to me, Grandma." The words landed heavy, final. I pictured them together. Kendra's hands shaking as she tried to steady the paper, her voice cracking on words I'd written with every ounce of truth I had left. Aaliyah's eyes wide, absorbing what she could. Innocence holding space for pain she barely understood. I could almost hear the ragged sound of Kendra's tears, the same as when she was a little girl and scraped her knee, but deeper now. Grown woman's sorrow, raw and unhidden. The image gutted me. Mother and daughter, bridged for once by the thing I'd feared most, honesty laid bare. I pressed my palm to my chest, feeling the beat of my heart, fast and shaky. That letter was no longer just mine. It was alive in their hands, doing the work I couldn't finish face to face. I hung up, sank onto the edge of my bed, and let the tears come, hot, silent, unstoppable. It wasn't weakness this time, but release. Like something old and hard inside me had finally given way. The clock on the dresser chimed noon. I didn't reach for my phone. There was nothing left to say, no rescue to call in. My choice was made, and the truth, my truth, was out in the open, undeniable. I sat in that clarity, stripped of every illusion, bracing for what would come next. The weeks after that letter stretched on, each day heavy as wet wool, every night sharp-edged with questions that wouldn't let me sleep. I told myself to be patient, to let the offer stand, but regret gnawed at me until my insides felt raw. Had it gone too far? Or not far enough? I'd replay Kendra's silence 1,000 times, her face, her voice, the way she used to look at me when she was a girl, before shame got its claws in her. I tried to eat, tried to work, but nothing tasted right. My hand shook at the smallest things, coffee spilling, keys dropped. Sometimes I'd start to dial her number, thumb hovering, but I'd freeze. What would I say? That I missed her? That I'd ruined us, or maybe saved us, and didn't know which? Each morning I almost called Edward, almost said, "Revoke it. Tell her it's over." But something in me held back. I remembered Mama, how long it took me to ask for her forgiveness, the years spent earning it, one stubborn apology at a time.
Pain changes shape, I told myself. It doesn't leave. It just becomes something you can hold. Weeks bled into a month. The house felt emptier, quieter, like even the walls were waiting for her to call. I moved through my days half awake, the world distant and dull. Then, one night, my phone buzzed. A single line lit the screen. Starting therapy Monday. My knees buckled. I sank to the floor, chest clenched so tight I could barely breathe, vision blurring at the edges. All the anger, the worry, the hope I'd tried to bury came rushing up at once. I wept, ugly, gasping sobs, rocking there on the kitchen tile, whispering thank you to every ancestor I could remember, barely able to form the words. Time slipped. The room spun. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, just let the collapse take me. Everything else fading into silence.
6 months later, I found myself standing at the back of the community center, half shielded by a folding chair. The room was packed, faces from every part of my life, warehouse workers, church folk, board members, even Mrs. Worthington in her pearls, stiff as ever in the front row. They called my name, but the words slid over me like water. I caught my own reflection in the window, posture straight, hands folded tight. My eyes kept darting to Kendra, seated on the edge of the stage, twisting the napkin to shreds. Edward Blake leaned in, voice low. "You ready for this, Gloria?" I didn't answer. My throat felt thick. The speeches went on. Praise, laughter, the hum of polite applause. I barely registered any of it until Kendra arose, moving toward the microphone with a halting step. The room quieted. She gripped the podium, knuckles white. For a second, she looked only at me. Last Christmas, her voice cracked, and she started again, louder. Last Christmas, I pushed my mother to the floor. Gasps, sharp and immediate. Mrs. Worthington's hand flew to her mouth. I felt my chest tighten. Aaliyah's eyes found mine, wide and pleading. Kendra's lips trembled. "Mama, I'm sorry. For everything." For a moment, silence. I felt every stare, the weight of judgment in the air. My feet moved before my mind caught up. I walked to her, each step unsteady. Kendra's face was streaked with tears. She reached for me, hands shaking. We held each other. Her heartbeat thudded against my chest, wild and desperate. Somewhere in the crowd, a chair scraped back hard, and the sound echoed through the hush. The applause started in slow bursts, then swelled. But above all was her heartbeat and the echo of a truth too big for words. I stood there raw and exposed, still trembling, knowing nothing was settled, but everything had changed. A year later, the house carried the scent of sweet potato and nutmeg, heavy, familiar, a sign that this time the season belonged to us. My grandchildren were in the living room, draping the old tree with bright cloth ornaments Kendra brought back from Ghana. Their laughter mixed with the music, soft and low. In the kitchen, Kendra stood beside me, her hands busy with collards, each leaf chopped in steady rhythm. For a long moment, we worked in easy silence. It was her who broke it, voice small, eyes on the cutting board. "You still forgive me?" I paused, wiped my hands on my apron, and turned to face her. The memory of that night flickered, the cold floor, the crack in her voice, the ache that lasted months. But now, looking at her, I saw the hard edges worn down, the pride tempered by something softer. I cupped her face in my palms, her cheeks warm, trembling just a little.
I said, steady as I could manage, "Every day." She nodded, tears gathering, but I let them be. Some things needed no more words. I moved to the table and picked up the candle. It was the same one that burned during my lowest hour, wick blackened but unspent. My hand shook only once as I struck the match. The flame caught, rising, throwing a gentle gold across our faces. I set the candle in the center, right between us, and watched the light dance, alive, forgiving. I whispered, not for show, but for truth, "This fire's for warmth now," and I let it burn, steady and bright, the past sealed behind us, nothing left but the quiet and the glow.